Hello, fiber friends. It is hot outside, and I am not in the mood to spin any wool at all whatsoever. I'm in the mood for smoothies and fruit and maybe some flowers. So I was thinking it might be time to do the very highly requested plant fibers spinning video. So that is what we are doing today. I am going to spin and then weave a small swatch of cloth using banana fiber, pineapple fiber, and rose fiber. I hope to share with you some strategies and tips for a good way to spin these fibers, and I'd also like to share a little of the history about some of these fibers and the manufacturing process of them, and some of the significance of these fibers, both historical and future, perhaps, of these fibers. And before we get started, I also want to mention that this video is sponsored by Skillshare, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later in the video. So grab a smoothie, grab some fruit, and let's make some yarn. All the fibers I'm using for the video today came from Hearthside Fibers. You can find links to the materials, equipment, and the sources that I'm referencing in this video, all listed in the video description. Let's start with the banana top. The first thing that I notice is that it feels very heavy compared to wool. I feel like this is a more dense fiber. It has, well, I usually don't like to check my staple length from the very end because I never know if it's been pulled apart or cut. And if it's cut, that could change things. This has a fairly long staple length. We're looking at about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. I feel like the best way to spin something with such a long staple length could be to spin from the fold. If I were going to use a worsted method for spinning this, I would need to make sure that my fiber supply hand was very far back. Otherwise, I am going to do a lot of work trying to yank those fibers out of the comb top when they're being held back by my fiber supply hand. We don't want to hold both ends of the staple length or we're not going to get anywhere. So to draft these out, a very light, gentle touch and holding it very far back on the comb top is going to be the key. But I think because of the length of these, I'm going to try spinning them from the fold. I am using my vintage Ashford Traditional to spin this banana fiber because it has such a long staple length. Even spinning from the fold, it's still a full 3 inches. I don't need to have a lot of twist. So this Ashford Traditional just has one very, I think it's a 7.5 or maybe a 6.5 ratio. I don't remember, but with a nice even slow treadle, I'm not going to get too much twist in this fiber, which I think is probably my biggest concern because it has such a dense feel to it, as opposed to wool. It's not a bad heavy feel. It's lovely. It's drapey. I'm just so used to wool, and I think many of you are as well. So that's kind of my baseline that I'm comparing to. Right, but because it has that, too much twist is going to make it feel very dense and ropey, and we don't want it to start to feel like that. We still want it to have a little life in it. So I don't want to over twist it. I'm going to pull out a staple length, fold it over my finger, just like that, and then get it started on my leader, and away we go. Banana fiber comes from Southeast Asia, and it has been used in textiles for thousands and thousands of years, perhaps even as old as 8,000 BCE. In Japan, banana fiber is used for making traditional kimono and kamishimo dress. In Nepal, weavers create beautiful, world-renowned traditional knotted rugs from banana fibers. India is the world's largest banana producer, with an annual output of 24.8 million tons. It's followed by China, Philippines, Ecuador, and Brazil. But that's just talking about the fruit. The leaves and the stems of the plant create bio-waste that must be dealt with. By extracting the fibers for other uses, besides fruit, such as pulp, paper, and textiles, farmers have an additional marketable resource that can bring them income. Bananas grow without a huge demand for pesticides or chemicals, and the fibers are biodegradable. The fabric feels cool to wear, it absorbs water, and it's often compared to feeling like linen. This is a fiber that I'm very excited to explore, not only in my hand spinning and crafting, but also in my wardrobe. More brands are starting to work with banana fiber fabrics. When I was doing research for this video, the articles I read about banana fibers were very hopeful and positive about the future of banana fiber as a viable, eco-friendly, and more economical alternative for cotton, which guzzles water, requires a lot of pesticides and intensive processing and growth, and just there are a lot of issues with cotton. I'm just about done with the banana fiber, and I really absolutely agree. It very much feels similar to flax. It does not have the crimp of wool, but it has that wonderful heavy drapey feeling of flax. And I was certainly right about not putting too much twist in this fiber. It does not need it. It's not the most slippery fiber. It does very much, to me, remind me of silk. Not necessarily a mulberry silk, but silk. It is silky. It does have a shine to it, a sheen to it, but there's a feeling in the banana fiber that almost feels powdery, if that makes sense. I'm enjoying the spin. I like it very much, but I definitely see how if someone is very sensitive to certain textures, this fiber might feel uncomfortable. So if you are a very sensory sensitive person when it comes to how fibers feel in your fingers, I definitely recommend trying a sample because this one is unique. But it drafts very smoothly. I'm having no trouble maintaining my consistency, and it's a very enjoyable spin to me. Let's take a look at the pineapple fiber next. It feels actually very similar to the banana fiber, but I feel like it has a little bit less of a powdery feel to it and a little bit smoother of a feel. The banana fiber, I would compare it to if you run your hand on a wall that has a matte paint on the wall, and then this would be more like an eggshell kind of a finish to the paint on the wall. That's sort of the difference how I would describe it. So let's take a look at the staple length, see what we're working with, get into it a little bit. It's also a very long staple. I would say this is probably about the same as the banana fiber. We just did one of these from the fold. Let's do this one worsted, and I am going to draft it just worsted style. Let's try it and see what happens. Pineapples are indigenous to South America. Pineapples have been cultivated there for centuries, and probably longer. When the Spanish and Portuguese figured out that South America exists, the pineapple became an instant luxury item in Europe. Because of the demand for pineapples in Europe, they were exported around the world during the Spanish colonial period to be grown on pineapple plantations. And some of those countries already had traditional textiles that were utilizing banana fibers, and people adapted their native weaving traditions to utilize the fibers they extracted from the pineapple leaves. In the Philippines, pineapple fibers were used in ways that banana fibers had been traditionally used to weave lustrous lace fabrics decorated with intricate floral embroidery that was exported to European aristocracy in the 18th and 19th centuries. In the Philippines, pineapple fibers were used to also make traditional clothing worn by the Filipino upper class. The fabric was light and breezy and comfortable to wear in a hot tropical climate. Some of these traditional textiles are being revived in the Philippines after being devastated during World War II. For such a sweet, delicious fruit, pineapples carry a lot of historical baggage that, if you're interested in world history, is worth a deeper dive. There's so much there. It's definitely beyond the scope of this video. I do mention all of these things, though, because I think it is really important to understand the history and context of the materials we are working with. We are all connected to each other through the threads of these fibers, and I'm grateful to have learned more about the beautiful and amazing textile history in Japan, Nepal, and the Philippines just from researching these fibers for this video. As a hand spinner, I naturally become closer to the fibers I'm working with, and as a result, I learn more about the cultures and the people that these fibers come from. Today in the world, there is still a huge demand for pineapple fruit, but when the fruit is harvested, the rest of the plant becomes bio-waste that the farmer then has to deal with. I found several research projects that are being done, one in particular in Malaysia, where they talked about how often the pineapple leaves are burned to clear the way for new pineapple plants. But they're working on a machine that could inexpensively and easily extract the fibers from the pineapple leaf that could provide farmers with additional products to sell for increased income. And also, it would help them with the bio-waste problem. I found similar research being done in Ethiopia as well, where many pineapples are also grown and exciting local and sustainable textiles initiatives are happening. The processing of pineapples seems to be, from my limited research here, more pesticide intensive than the growing of bananas. And so I think that what it comes down to is that we just have to make choices with the things that we have available to us. But I do think that these are definitely some good alternatives to working with wool if you don't want to, if it's allergenic to you, if you have easier access to these fibers, or perhaps you just prefer to work with plant fibers. Spinning this fiber worsted was a little tricky to maintain the consistency. It took a little extra concentration, I will admit, and I found that this fiber did have a little bit more texture than the banana fiber did. The pineapple fiber has some of these little kind of very soft, it almost reminds me of spinning a tweed. It's like there's these little extra little bits in there. I picked out some of them. I'm not sure if they're just shorter fibers or you know, something in the processing of it, the fibers got cut or fuzzed up. I don't know, but I kind of really like the texture that it gives. And I find it different than the banana fibers in a very kind of soft, and it just has a little bit more texture to it, and I like it. It feels expressive to me, but I will say that the long draw from the fold is probably a more fun spin. And finally, let's take a look at our rose fiber. Now this says it comes from rose bushes. It is soft. It's much closer to a mulberry silk, much more than the other fibers were, but when I rub my fingers on the rose fiber, I press it together and kind of rub it together, it squeaks. I feel the squeak. So let's check our staple length and get spinning so we can talk about this fiber. Now this has a much shorter staple than the other fibers did. This is much more akin to a lock of wool in terms of staple length, just kind of like a you know, kind of an average lock of wool. So I think this actually might be a nice fiber to blend with some wool if you wanted it to have a little bit extra drapiness, the softness that you can feel from this, and perhaps some of that sheen and shine. So how should we spin this? Well, I had so much fun with the long draw. I kind of maybe want to do this one from the fold as well, because it's just a lot of fun to spin like that. So I think that's what I'll be doing for this one as well. I also know for sure that spinning this from the fold is going to help with some of this slipperiness that I'm feeling. I think doing this in a worsted draft, it would work better if it's a very fine yarn, and I'd like it to be comparable to the other ones I did, which were more of a sport weight and a worsted weight. So spinning from the fold it is. With rose, I initially assumed that rose fiber was extracted like bast fibers in a similar way to pineapple or banana fibers from the leaves, or perhaps like flax, hemp, rami, or nettle. But oh sadness, a rose by any other name is actually Viscous Rayon. Beersheba Farm has a really good breakdown on rose fiber, so I'll have their blog post about it listed with this video's resources. Viscous Rayon is a regenerated cellulose product. It involves breaking the plant material down using caustic chemicals until all that is left is the pure cellulose of the plant. It is then turned into a viscous kind of goo that is extruded and spun into filaments. Those filaments are the fibers that we draft as we spin them. Some other common sources of plant cellulose used to produce viscous rayon are wood pulp, soy, sugarcane, and bamboo. Yep, bamboo fiber is a rayon. And I can tell you right now, spinning this rose top, it definitely feels very similar to bamboo. It is absolutely a rayon feeling fiber. Now, while there are improvements being made in the processing of rayon to reduce chemical requirements and reuse and closed systems and things, there's technologies being developed to improve those things, it is still a very chemically intensive process. In terms of the chemical load of all of these fibers, I really think that more research needs to be done. This video is a very short overview of these things, but I hope that I've at least given you, if that is something that you really want to deep dive into, a starting place, something to look further into, and perhaps also to be aware of these fibers as they may become more available in a commercial sense when we purchase clothing. Let me tell you just a little bit about this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anyone who loves learning and wants to explore their creativity by learning new skills. If you have a specific skill you're trying to learn, Skillshare is the perfect place to start. They even have a wide range of crafting and fiber art related videos to choose from, including knitting, crochet, weaving, and a topic I'm very interested in at the moment, Natural dye. I watched a Skillshare video called Natural Dyeing, Bundle Dye Fabric with Vibrant Natural Color by Casey Gallagher Newman. I loved how she showed a wide variety of dye plants and natural materials along with the silk she had dyed them with, so I could clearly see what kinds of color could be achieved with each plant. I have lots of things blooming in my yard right now, so when it cools off this evening, I'll be out there gathering flowers and leaves for a dye project. If you would like to try Skillshare, I have a link in the video description that you can use. The first 1,000 people to use this link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. I look forward to hearing about any projects you try that you are inspired to explore through Skillshare, and I hope that you enjoy your trial. Now let's get back to our project. I have created a small woven swatch with each of these different fibers, and I'm ready to take a closer look to see how they feel. Let's start in the same order that we spun them with the banana. So here is the yarn from the banana fiber, and here is the woven swatch. It feels like flax does. Very, very, very similar to flax, to a linen. Almost, it almost feels kind of pliable in a way that it sort of almost holds its shape. But from the research I've done, it does say that this will become softer and have more drape to it as it's washed. It softens up as it washes. It's very, very strong. I had some that I tried to, break apart just by pulling, and it started digging into my skin. I suggest cutting, not pulling. Banana fiber is very strong, so I can absolutely see how this would be used for making rugs, mats, those kinds of durable textiles. And I would actually love to do a weaving project to make some table, like placemats or something with this. I feel like they would be very durable and washable and really nice. The pineapple was very, very similar to the banana. I can put them side by side. And right now at this moment, I can tell you which is which because I spent recent time with each one. But I think if I came back to this in a month or two, I would really struggle to figure out which was which just by the feel because I don't have as much experience working with these fibers separately. But the pineapple does feel very similar to the banana. This one's a little more stiff, and that's because I did go a little thicker when I was spinning it, but it does sort of have that same kind of feel where it kind of holds the shape you mold it into. This would also be really nice for some mats or something kind of durable like that, like cushions would probably be really amazing with this. I noticed for a lot of the historical textiles that we discussed earlier in this video and some of those examples I showed, I did see some pictures that I couldn't share because they weren't copyright free, of people weaving with pineapple fibers. They were using individual strands. They were not spun and plied fibers or spun at all. They were just individual strands of the pineapple fibers that people were weaving with, and I think that was how they were able to get such just almost iridescent, gauzy, gorgeous textiles. The skill, just amazing. But for a crafting purpose, for just a home textile producer, hand spinner, I think these would really make some nice kind of household textiles. And then of course the rayon. This rose feels just like spinning bamboo. And I remember a few years ago there was a lot of yarn on the market that was labeled as bamboo yarn, and then people got upset because it sort of gave the implication that it was being produced in the same way as these fibers, where individual fibers perhaps are being stripped from the bamboo to make the yarn from. And that's not the case. It was a rayon. And so they actually, legally, it was a whole big deal, and they had to change their labeling to now say rayon made from bamboo. So this is the same deal as that. The rose fiber, if it comes from rose bushes, we could never tell at this point because it's been broken down to the pure cellulose and reconstructed into the fibers. But it absolutely feels like rayon. It feels very soft and silky, and I think there's a place for every textile. I do. If you don't want to use silk for whatever reason, since silk is sometimes hard to find and it's certainly always expensive. This was invented to be a substitute for silk, and I think it stands up to that. Overall, I just want to say that I'm very grateful as a hand spinner to have access to these different fibers, especially in the way that some of these fibers in particular are being looked at as possible solutions for some of the ecological problems we're having with our textiles and the systems that we have established right now. I would really love to blend some of this with other different fibers and experiment and explore more with these. If you have spun with any of these fibers, I would love to hear from you about what you thought of them. And if not, are you intrigued to try any of these fibers after watching this video? Let me know all about your thoughts in the comment section. Now I am going to go drink another smoothie and stay cool. Happy spinning, friends!